So the first thing we find is like, hey, men see that messy room and they rate it as just as messy as women. So they don't, there's not this like gender difference about men can't see mess. That's a lie. Reject it. That's like not true. And then the thing we asked him was like, okay, well, what if someone showed up unexpectedly at this person's house? Which is exactly your question that you asked your wife, right? Like if someone showed up, if our friends show, and we have different groups, if your friend
Mhm.
showed up, if your boss showed up, if an in-law showed up, and they looked at this room, they looked at this house, they looked at this yard, what would they think? And the answer was if that was a woman's room, even if it was relatively clean, they would think she's less competent, capable, likable.
Hi, my name's Zach. I'm your favorite mental load coach. I teach men, sometimes women, to better understand invisible labor. When it comes to domestic labor, mental load, emotional labor, I got you covered. I teach men emotional literacy and fluency. I bring guests on that for us to have conversations to improve our understanding of these concepts and these topics. Sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree, but the main goal is for us to improve those conversations. Welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. And hey, if this is not your first time on here, I kindly invite you to leave a review or hit the follow button if you haven't already. Look forward to sharing with you today. Hello and welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. Today I'm here with Leah Ruppanner. Am I saying
Perfect.
that right?
Yeah, you did a beautiful job.
Thank you. She is just about finished and is releasing her book next week, Drained, Reduce Your Mental Load to Do Less and Be More. Leah, I messaged you on LinkedIn the moment that I saw the title of your book because I think of myself, I don't want to say an authoritative figure, but I would say a lot of people look to me when it comes to mental load. So if there's a book coming out about it, I need to know about it. I want to know the person, and I want to let people know about another angle because I think I consistently see online every day someone saying, "I figured out the mental load," and I had this annoyed reaction to this lady that was like, "No, you didn't. You definitely didn't. You put target signs. You added to your own mental load and infantilized your husband." So,
Oh.
um, when I consistently see terrible takes on how to improve ownership of the mental load, I want to flood the streets with people that are giving good takes on it. So, Leah, thank you for joining with me. Could you tell me a little bit about the inspiration of the book and/or uh, what led you to writing this one?
Okay, now I'm so nervous, right? Like, what if I end up giving you all this stuff and you're like, oh, this woman's not as full
I
of
will
it.
push back
Um,
on it. I I
okay.
I, I am not afraid to. I mean, when Eve Rodsky came on, I invited her to tell me how I'm teaching her method wrong. It didn't end up. It went well, but I invited her to rip me to shreds.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and
Yeah.
hi to Eve. Eve, hi. Eve actually wrote a little blurb for my book, so we're all in these kind of very shared worlds. So I am a professor of sociology at the University of Melbourne in Australia, but you can tell from my accent that I am from the US, born and bred, even though I said Melbourne and Australia, like in a way that made you think, that woman's multicultural. She's a woman of the world. And so I've been studying, I am Australia's top gender scholar, but I've been studying gender, work, and family for 20 years, right? So I've published 70 academic articles. I have a book on looking at US states about which is the best state. It's called Motherlands, which is the best state for parents to live, right? And we think of the US as being this kind of single place, but actually, if you've ever lived in California, it's very different than living in Tennessee and then different
Mm.
in living in New York than Massachusetts. So this is kind of my foundation is I'm a researcher, but I'm very good at research translation. And so one of the things that kept happening is having someone who has studied gender, work, family, housework, marital satisfaction, what happens when you go from one kid to two kids, what happens when, you do more housework than your partner, is that this thing kept coming up that was limiting women. This thing kept coming up that was driving women into burnout. This thing kept coming up that was like, why can we not have this conversation in a productive way with my partner? And what was so clear, and this is where your content comes in, right? Is
Mm.
it was so clear that what we're really missing is a deep, thorough understanding of the mental load. That the mental load is, well, let me say it this way. The mental load is this thing that keeps getting in the way of women's success, of, relationships, of burnout. And one of the things that I was trying to figure out is like, what do we have right about it based on our current definitions? and where do we need to go next, right? Like, what do we have that makes sense? And how can I bring the empirics and the research to help push the conversation a little bit further forward? And so, hence the book Drained is born. And in it, I give you kind of a new definition and a new different types of mental load that you're doing. I know you look excited.
Yeah, so because I think like all the time I dumb it down for people into 90 seconds. So given that you've done, I have a lot of experiential talks, experiments, coaching with men. I think I've worked with somewhere around like 200. You want to show me something? Um, Here's what I want. What I want to do. Hold on a second, Ev. Go ahead, show me real quick. Oh, it's the green bag guy. Is he catching them? Good job. I like it. Could you hear that, by the way?
Yes, and I loved it. Yes,
Um,
and I loved it.
she, she's watching Spider-Man with this in the Spider-Verse right now.
So cute.
Um, so I dumb it down for people all the time, and sometimes it's kind of annoying. So like nerding out a little bit more. So here's what I would like to do: is I'm going to try to tell you what I think mental load is, how I go about it,
Right.
and you tell me if you were telling the same thing or if you had to interpret for someone, what would you adjust about it? Um, and I'm okay if you say like, here's what I feel like you're missing from it. Because I'm sure you've had to explain mental load a gazillion times, kind of like I have. Um, so mental load, I typically say is kind of, I usually think of it as cognitive labor and emotional labor kind of under one umbrella is mental load, and people typically kind of are talking about both when they use the buzzword mental
Yep.
load. And then when I break that into those two pieces, mental load and cognitive labor, oh, I'm going to cite some of this wrong, but think about Alison Damager and how she breaks down cognitive labor. So you have the conception of the thinking about it up front, which I kind of taken from Eve Rodsky's conception, planning, execution. I think of it as emotional labor is the conceiving of the thing. And then planning is actually not like a full definition of the cognitive labor. I think Allison broke into four pieces, was like, oh, fuck, I'm going to forget it. But it's like the initial thinking about it, the kind of researching, planning stage of it, and then I know there's a phase that I'm missing, but then there's like the retroactive. Did that work? Like the monitoring of it afterwards, and then emotional labor, which me and Rose Hackman, she wrote the emotional labor book. Um, she had originally in her book, I think, defined it as like the editing and adjustment of your tone and or your own manipulation of your own feelings as you're communicating with someone else. And
Yeah.
I've come to think, I think there's a little bit more nuance. There's a little bit other kinds of emotional labor, like when Alyssa and I are not having a great conversation, pausing to listen when I'm wicked triggered, I feel hurt, I feel like I'm attacked, and pausing myself so that I can listen to her. Um, it's almost like I almost want to call it empathetic emotional labor, which is almost like a redundancy, but um, where do you feel like either I'm missing, oversimplifying, or like could add some flavor to where I just went with that?
Okay. The professor is in. I'm ready for this.
I was gonna say the joy on your face is
I
fantastic right
can't
now.
wait. I can't wait. I don't think I'm gonna say to you, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're missing anything. I don't think you're missing anything, and I don't think you're wrong. I think what's going on is the conversation is so confusing that
Mm,
everyone's like, oh, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's like when you describe that, I actually think it's too much information and it's hard for people to kind of access. You can go if you need to. Okay, it's too much information and it's a little bit difficult for you to access that piece of it. So, what I'm doing is in the book, well, I'll take a step back. We published this research article. So, some of in conversation with Allison's work and stuff. So, Dean, Churchill, and Ruppanner 2019, 2020, we published this research article where we say actually what the mental load is emotional thinking work. Full stop. You can do some cognitive labor. You can do some emotional labor. So cognitive labor is like your thinking work. It's like, okay, did I remember to, you know, put the milk on for the groceries? Did I remember to sign someone up? Some of that is just straight cognitive labor. Some of that is just list making, right? And emotional labor, sometimes you do emotional labor and when you're checking in on people or you're pausing or you're taking that moment, right? When you describe the conflict. You will do things that are just straight cognitive. You will do things that are just straight emotional labor. You will do things that just straight physical labor, cleaning, picking stuff up, etc. What we define the mental load in that article, and then I bring into the book, is the mental load is when those two things come together. It's when it's when cognitive labor has an emotional element. So if for you, it's just like, we need to get milk on the list, straight up cognitive labor, I can hand that to you. We can tick it off the box. We can cross it out. But it's when you do this thing of, I need to put milk on the list because if I don't, then my child is going to have a meltdown the next day. And then actually, if they have a meltdown the next day, what's going to happen when they show up at school? Are they going to be able to be focused because they didn't have the milk in the morning? And if they're not focused at school, then what does that mean in terms of their future? Are they going to be behind? I mean, they're only in kindergarten, but do I even have them in the right school? Do I need to move neighborhoods? Am I in the right district? Do they have the right friends? But what about their teacher? Did I forget to? Okay, so you can see, and when I do this, you're probably like, yeah, that's the mental load. Is you're starting to do this, what started as just a cognitive labor thought, it's spiraling into this deeply emotional thinking work where you're doing 85 different what ifs, what will happen, next steps. Will they get into Harvard? Are they going to be competitive? Will they be destitute? Will they be able to come back from COVID-19? So the mental load is emotional thinking work, full stop. I'm putting my flag in the sand, right? Like, that's it. It's when those things overlap. What I'm also saying to people is
which kind of comes back to, it makes sense why it feels like I try to delineate the two, because mental load, what you're saying is it only is mental load when it includes both.
correct.
Got it.
And that we published, right? That was our kind of our academic piece. Only is the mental load when it includes both. We'll bring different pieces, but once those overlap, that's the mental load. And that's why it's so emotional, right? Emotional in positive ways can be some of the most joyful moments when you do some emotional thinking work to make sure your child is well taken care of. They have a beautiful holiday experience, like a vacation, right? And something is absolutely magical. That's a mental load that brings you a positive, yay, that's great. Or it can be really heavy. So it's work we have to do that can bring emotion, that is emotionally laden, both positive and negative. Then what I want to say to you is what you're describing. I'm giving you 8 different types of mental load. So to date, I think a lot of what we've thought about the mental load is what I call life organization. And I'm just going to give you little definitions. So life organization is this idea that we are staying on top of the planning and the tasks. And when we think about some of what, Allison has done or some of the previous work, and a lot of your content, right, is about this life organization work. It's like, again, the milk as the example is the perfect example of like, this is something that we need to keep on top of. We need to plan and we need to ensure that it's working for our lives. That's one type of mental load. The second type of mental load is emotional support. And that's when you do the work of checking in on your family, your friends, and your coworkers. The third type we do is relationship hygiene. And this is making strong connections for yourself and for others. So if you are there organizing, play dates for your kids, some of that will be life organization work, right? Just the actual texting.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you talk about relationship hygiene and like maintaining relationships, I typically use sort of a blanket term of kin keeping.
Yeah.
Is that the term you like to use? Is there a slightly different term you like to use, or do you break it down differently?
I love this interview. This is great. Kin keeping, absolutely. The reason I don't use it because I think it's bigger than our kin. So yes, you are doing some kin keeping work, and yes, you are doing it for family members, right? Aunties, uncles, grandmothers, fill in the blank. But you're also doing it for like building networks and friendships for your kids. And I'm making the argument, and I have this new little Light and Lab. The website's up. You can check it out. You can actually do a test to see where your mental load. You can do, sorry, I'm not supposed to use test. You can do a self-assessed guide to figure out where your mental load is going. But I want to challenge you too to start thinking about like, Your mental load is your emotional, the bandwidth you have for emotional thinking work. So you have a certain amount of mental load energy, and it's going to these different categories, but it's going to these different categories just for your work, for your life, and for family. And so when I say you do relationship hygiene at work, you might do it all the time. You're doing it here with me right now, right? Like you're trying to build your networks. We would call this networking. So when you say like, is it kin keeping? I'm saying yes. And it's bigger than that because you do it in other areas of your life. You do it for other people. You do it for your kids. You might do it at work. So you're keeping and maintaining relationships, and your mental load. I'm almost done with this, I promise, but I'm not. And your mental load is going to that. And the difference is that often men's mental load are spent in ways that are different to women's, right? So if you have a certain amount of mental load energy and your relationship hygiene is going to building networks and relationships at work, and hers is going to make sure that, the best friend from kindergarten is being invited and included, and am I being nice to that mom, and what does that look like? Well, one is going to move you towards career ambition, money, right? And one is going to move you towards your children having better, social relations. They're both valuable, but one's bringing you to a different goal.
Let me ask you a question. So I made this video on YouTube the other day. It was like a longer response, which was I'm gonna rope it back into what we're talking about here.
Great.
Is like men not seeing dirt. Like I acknowledge like Alyssa sees more than I do. She notices things are dirty quicker than
That's
I
my
do.
study. This is my
Um,
study too. Keep going.
so you're gonna get to tell me where I'm fucking up the translation of it.
You're doing
Um,
great.
so I think it came to me one day when we had this two living situations ago. We had this really long driveway, and Alyssa was sharing her dislike for the weeds growing on the side. She grew up in a home that was very good about keeping the lawn, keeping and managing things outside. My family, not so much. When people would drive up, I said, "What's your experience when they drive up the lawn or drive up the long driveway?" She's like, "Disgust, like shame, like we're not managing that." And I said, "Wow, for me, it's pride and joy that we have a house that we can even afford this." And I rope that into similarly, you see around Thanksgiving and Christmas is those videos of the guys leaf blowing outside while guests
Yeah.
are about to come over in 30 minutes. And I'm saying, like, I think a lot of men are judged more and feel internalized shame based on the perception of people and whether they're protecting and providing like shelter um, in whatever the 2025 version, 2026 version is of what that hunter gatherer mentality is, versus a lot more women are feeling shame based on the perception of what the interior of their home looks like. So where am I missing, and or like how can I add more color flavor to what I just said there, around like men seeing the dirt, men seeing the mess
Okay. Well,
differently.
you're going to be so glad you invited me on this podcast. You're going to be thrilled. So first, you're welcome. Second is I have you're hitting on two of my additional categories, right? Of mental load thinking. One is dream building. It's like, how do we make sure that we have all the things to make sure everyone's dreams are happening? And the other is the mental load of safety. How do I make sure, I'm thinking
Mm.
about anticipating things that will go wrong? And when you say to me like, but I'm thinking about dream building, like, oh, we got this house, like my mental load energy is going to how can we do more so that we can have more, so that I can do more so we can have more. That's dream building mental load. And what's interesting is men, you were right, like men, the fathers described carrying much more of that, and they talked about their dreams were investments in the family. The problem with that is that women's dreams were often secondary. When I talked to the mothers, those dreams had disappeared. They'd been starved. They weren't there. And so there's a rebalancing that needs to happen there. But we need the language first. I'm saying this to you. If I'm saying to you,
Hmm.
hey, these are 8 different types of mental load, and you're now giving me 2 more that are in my list that I wrote into my book. It's like, and you talk about this stuff all the time, right? You're thinking about it. You're in the zeitgeist. You're listening to what people say. And I'm hoping these things feel fresh to you or give you new language. One of the things I say throughout the book is like, how could we have ever done this if we don't have the language? How could we ever talked about this? You don't have the language, so you can't even have the conversation because you don't even have the words to describe what you're carrying. The second thing is, thank you very much for letting me plug my own research again.
Fuck
Um,
yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
So,
and furthermore, because like, I don't know if you've seen Do Better Jonathan on Instagram. He made an accident of quoting me when he was actually quoting Corinne Lowe. And so when it's like she made a response video, which was fantastic, of like, this is what it's like to be a woman researcher, is you get misquoted and men get credit for your work. And so I'm glad that you're getting more credit for the work. That this is my full-time business, is helping men do this. So making sure that I'm citing the right people and like you're getting credit for it.
okay, well, thank you. Y'all, if you buy my book, I'll get money for it too. But and it's good, and it's good because on some level we need it has to go into the zeitgeist, right? This all has to be like in the conversation. Anyway, so we did the study in, I can't even remember, to give a year, 20 something, 2010, 2019. And basically one of the things we were trying to test, I have really good friends, Sabino Cornrich at NYU and Sarah Tabot at UC Santa Barbara. And we were trying to test this idea of like, what gets people tripped up, right? Like, what is the issue here? And one of the things is that there's this kind of norm or expectation or myth or lie. So I have a podcast, Misperceived Podcast, where I break down research and help you understand where you get it all wrong. And this is one of the podcasts and one of the articles that I wrote that went so far is like, we think that men can't see mess. There's this idea that men are dirt blind. And so what we did is we took the exact same room. One was messy, one was clean. And it's starting to make its round again on the socials. So you can see Be a Happier Parent just did a post and it got 4 million views and he shows the room. And so we had a messy and a clean room, and then we switched the gender. So we said like, okay, this is John's room or this is Jennifer's room. And one of the things we wanted to do first was test, first off, can men even see the mess? Because if men actually can't see mess, like men say, I don't know, I just can't see the dishes, I can't see the piles, then they would look at that messy photo and see it be clean, right? They would look at that and go, no, 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 that's a
Is
clean photo.
what's the question that they're being asked? Like, is it, hey, check out this room, and then coming back and saying, hey, did you notice anything about the room? Or is it saying, how messy is this room? Like, what? I'm so curious how I went with the research on that.
Okay, so it's a little bit of both. First is that we use strategic coercion. No, we don't tell people at the start, because if you say to people, we want to know if you
Right.
think men are messy, then
Yeah.
they'll be like, I don't think men are messy, and it messes with our results, right? So the way we do it is we start out by saying, Jennifer is renting her room out on Airbnb. And we want to know if people how would people view this? If you're someone who's coming in to look at this Jennifer's room, what would you think? And so then we say, like, how messy do you think this room is? How clean do you think this room is? That's kind of our first one.
So it's like you're contextualizing the question into something else that you're going to get some pretty decent data from, because it's not asking how messy is this, and that would be too obvious. And someone like me, like, I think I would do a good job identifying that they're the same if I was asked how messy is it, because that's what we're studying right now, versus gotcha,
Exactly.
beautiful.
And you don't see the same room, right? So you only get one. Like, let's say Zach, you come into our study
Yeah.
and we go, hey, Zach, like, Jennifer's thinking about renting this out on Airbnb. She wants to know if people came in, what would they think about the room? What would they think about her? We probably even have a question like, would you rent it? Would you get the money? And then you're like, oh, I'm going to help this woman. I'm going to help her. I'm going to tell her the truths about like, yeah, this is what I think, because we don't want to ping them. We don't want to get them. We don't want to mess with the data, the results, because then that's
Yeah.
a problem. So the first thing we find is like, hey, men see that messy room and they rate it as just as messy as women. So there's not this like gender difference about men can't see mess. That's a lie. Reject it. That's like not true. And then the thing we asked them was like, okay, well, what if someone showed up unexpectedly at this person's house? Which is exactly your question that you asked your wife, right? Like if someone showed up, if our friends and we have different groups, if your friend showed up, if your boss showed up, if an in-law showed up, and they looked at this room, they looked at this house, they looked at this yard, what would they think? And the answer was, if that was a woman's room, even if it was relatively clean, they would think she's less competent, capable, likable. She's less, not just messy, right? It's not that she's, messy or clean. It's that she's a less capable person. She's less competent. When we ask them, how would you view her? They're like, oh no, I wouldn't judge her at all. But if someone else shows up, man, they're going to judge that woman. So when your wife is saying like, I have this
Interesting.
internal narrative going in my head that like someone's going to show up and be like, you're a terrible human. We have research that says she's not making this up. People agree. They think they're good, and they're
Yeah.
not going to judge you in the same way. And that's a mental load. That's a mental load drain.
Yeah. Wow.
How do you feel with those truths?
It's interesting because what you're saying is that the people directly wouldn't judge, but they're saying that other people outside of them probably would judge, which it almost feels like like when you think about what like currency, right? Like
Yeah.
dollars aren't actually connected to anything via there's no gold standard that they're connected to. So technically, we're all just agreeing that money works and it has value. Like we're
Yeah.
just like a epic conspiracy almost. Not quite. It used to be connected to gold, but like now it's based on people's agreement. So similarly, it almost feels like it's disappointing knowing that I'm curious how many people we're basing it off of. Because I know for sure, like my grandmother, my mother-in-law's grandmother, um, she would have for sure actually felt that way. And I think probably the vast majority of the people that I know are similar. Like, I'm not going to judge you. And like, I know people would judge you. But the question is, when we say people would judge you, what percent are we talking about? And how much more heavy, how many actual people are we talking about? And does it become a like thicker, heavier perception in our head because it feels like a lot because we hear that repeated a lot versus the actual people that are making those judgments, and we should just give them a middle finger.
Yes.
But we don't know how many there are, and we don't
Yeah.
know which ones they are, kind of. So it's like I think it's encouraging because I think for myself and a lot of the other guys that are working on improving our understanding of these things, so we wish our partners were more like us and caring less about the way things were, and we wish. And we're constantly, I know I've certainly said it before. I don't say it the same way that I say it now, but like I used to say, like, no one's going to judge you for that. Stop it. Like, and I know that on some level that's not true, but on the 99% level, it's true. So mm, I wish I could train Alyssa to not feel that, and that's not our reality. So it gives me hope that we could work closer towards that via the zeitgeist and changing how people see their own perceptions and willingness to judge others on things and talk about how they're going about judging people and trying to be more thoughtful about the comments that they make. The simple things like when people say, "Are you such a good dad?" inside the grocery store, like, no, I'm just existing. I'm doing basic, like, if we can slowly chip away at that culture, but within judgments of homes, that gives me hope that change can happen.
Congratulations on becoming a sociologist. Welcome. You just got your degree. Welcome. Uh, One of the things I talk about in the book is exactly what I'm actually, you're hitting on another, exactly what I'm talking about in the book. I talk about how can we activate sociology as our superpower. And sociology as our superpower is this idea of like exactly what you're doing of like, okay, well, wait, I've internalized this norm. I don't know, like, who are the other? Are they real? Are they hypothetical? Is it coming from watching, socialized into my family? Is it the shows I watch? Who is it? Is it culture writ large? Is it just the water we swim in? I mean, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Do I care? How do I care about this judgment? I mean, it's easy for you to say to your partner, your wife, or whatever, like, drop this and don't care. But if she knows that she's going to be punished, it's harder to do. But even that shared understanding of like, oh, you're not making that up, right? Like, I'm empathetic. Like, they really are, one of the things that came through was like, we have these same sex couples and, that are coming together and they're saying, like, this is a chapter in my book. They're like, no, I get it because I live in that world too. I swim in the same water you swim in. So when you say this really does matter, I am going to be punished if I show up and my child has mismatched socks. But if you, the dad, show up and your kid has mismatched socks, they think it's cute that you tried. But that's a real judgment that I can feel and I can hear it in the comments and I can see it in the way people look and I can hear it in the size. And that actually makes me feel like I'm doing a bad job, right? And so what I want people to start doing, and I have this thing called this mental load audit, is to start thinking this through like you're doing of like who are the who, what are the expectations, and and how can I lighten this, be more empathetic, change the culture, change the narrative. That's the goal, right? To start having doing things that are aligned with your
Yeah.
loves and your purposes and your lives, and like dropping some of this heavy stuff that
Yeah.
weighs us down, that doesn't really matter if we're really working towards our bigger goals. Like, this is important, I see it, I'm empathetic, but that's not where we're heading. We're heading towards greatness. And so is this important in that or not? Like, kind of like filtering it. So getting a way to sift it. And that's what my mental audit will offer you. It'll give you that tool to start to be able to think like a sociologist. Activate sociology as your
Mm.
superpower.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I forget, I went over to, so we live in a condo complex of people that have all kind of agreed we want to be villagers with each other.
I
We
love
have like
this.
common meetings once a month. And I've been trying to get to know the other parents, especially because we're going to need, more support and for when the twins come in a couple months, and having places for her to go when we're going to need that social fabric support. And I remember at one point someone um, invited me in, or like, oh, I didn't clean up before you came. I forget what the comment was, but there was this after we talked, and I like pushed back and like, hey, we can be friends like that. Like, yeah, I guess it is a different level of friendship when you can invite friends over without cleaning up. And it's what you're talking about is like a macro, like a more exponential, like a larger mindset of that thinking around people. So it sounds like some of the
Yeah.
problem solving that you're helping, especially women with here, is partially acknowledging the level of reality of that looming negative perception, along with, it sounds like, adjusting for what feels more true to you. Um, Say a little bit more about where and or how you speak to men. Actually,
Yeah.
before I ask that question, I want to say another thing, and again, I'm going to have you push back and audit me.
I can't
Is
wait.
one of the you've said multiple times now that like one of the big solutions that you kind of see is like we need language for stuff. So sometimes when I've done a couple corporate like ERG talks, and I keep it stupid simple. It is a short set of slides of vocabulary. It's pretty much a vocabulary lesson with a group talk at the end, where we're saying like, okay, this is what domestic labor is. This is what
Yeah.
mental load slash cognitive labor is. This is what emotional labor is. This is what clerical labor is slash gray work. This is what kin keeping slash culture keeping is. Okay, now acknowledge what are the heaviest ones you experience. And then there's one workshop that I was hired specifically by the manager to help one of the young men understand how much mental load he was adding to like the secretaries, because he wasn't using the company AI to answer his questions. Like, why would I use that? I could just ask her. Um, and so one of our goals was hoping I could help him get to a vulnerable place where we're like, oh wow, I like add a ton of that for my colleagues. Um, and it's so cool watching people acknowledge where they add things to their colleagues out loud in like a room of 15 to 60 people. So my tip of, and especially my number one DM question is, how do I explain mental load to my husband? And so my typical answer is, what do they do for work? And or what is a place where they find pride, that they have like identity, and they like feel a sense of ownership of something. And then, like I do as a parent, and I help my 4-year-old label, hey, you did a great job cleaning up after yourself. Hey, you did a great job putting your socks on. You did a great job saying please. I'm labeling things that I want more behavior from, similar to what and again, I don't like that I'm adding emotional labor to these. One, they are asked, it's being asked of me. So my encouragement is saying, hey, when they come home and complain about their boss or their colleague, start saying, oh, it sounds like you carry a lot of the mental load of that. It sounds like you do a lot of cognitive labor for your colleague. Wow, it sounds like you have to do a lot of emotional labor for your manager when they want to vent about a client. Meanwhile, you're just like letting them vent to you and validating their emotions. And I think that when they can start seeing that vocabulary in a realm that they feel the burden, and or that they feel confidence in, that they will start to see it as an objective thing rather than something that they're at a deficit in. So if you just drop it on them like, I carry all the mental load in the house, you don't even think about what the kids need, they're like, oh, fuck, I guess you're kind of right. But at the same time, I'm going to be defensive because you're attacking me right now. versus if they get the vocabulary first and then you start saying, I carry the mental load of, Alyssa shared with me the other day. We don't have programmable thermostats. We just moved here a couple months ago. She changes it down to 10 degrees, down 10 degrees every night, and then up 10 degrees every morning. And she's like, I just want to make sure you're aware of that because I would love to not be the only one doing that. I'd love to come downstairs into a warm-ish living room rather than wicked cold one. Um, where where would you edit, adjust, and or add color flavor to kind of what I said there?
It's interesting because thank you for again letting me talk about research. I have another study.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
so we had another study with US based parents, and we looked at using the American Time Use Survey, where we looked over time to see what were the differences in time use in terms of housework and childcare and paid employment, comparing baby boomers to Gen X to millennials at same ages and stages. So it's like you can almost have these overlapping groups. And one of the things that we found was that men have increased their time. So Gen X men are doing more than boomers, millennials are doing more than Gen X, right? So one of the things that I think happens, one of the kind of challenges I think that happens in the conversation is men feel like, but I'm doing more. Wait a minute, what's going on? I've picked up more. And I'm saying to you, yes, you have. And the data shows that you have. You're doing more. You're doing more time with your kids. You're doing more time in the core housework, not just the cutting the lawn, but the cooking, the cleaning, you're doing more. You're spending more time. And that's something that should be celebrated 100%, right? Like that's great. When I switch over to the mental load research, right, is I think there's two issues. One is that, again, as I said to you before, we don't have the language. So when I would do the interviews with the dads and I would hear what they had to say, and then I would come back in and say, let's do a mental load audit, right? Because this is all empirically tested. Everything I'm giving you, I've done with people, real people with an evaluation around it. The men would say like, yeah, share it. And then I'd say, okay, cool. Let's go down the 8 types. For example, one type is magic making. What are you doing in terms of creating magic during, say, the holidays? What are you doing in terms of, the Secret Santa? Like, I mean, this is an example. And they would go like, wait, what? Like it's like your wife with the thermostat. Like, wait, what? So someone's doing that? Yeah, no. Like, what are you doing about that kind of magic making work? What are you doing in terms of the emotional support, mental load of the emotional support when your kids come home and they had a hard day and it's like, no. She does that because she's better at it. This is Allison's work. It came through my work too. No. She does that because the kids just connect to her better because she's more emotional, right? The men would talk about it as inherent emotion. Like you have an inherent ability when they do this comparison of the mental load to their wives or their women partners, right? It'd be like, she's just better at that than me. It's like, no, and I'm saying to you, no, she's been socialized from birth into being more empathetic. And one of the things we talk about within our team is like, but you do this work at work, right? Like you just said, you're empathetic when you're there with your colleagues. If you have a customer and a problem's gone wrong, you do all the right things. Active listening, validation, taking responsibility. So it's a skill that you're building at work, but you're not bringing it across to home, but you have it. You just haven't activated it and you don't have the language. And then the third thing I'll say to you is we just published this article too about the mental load of dads specifically. And one of the things that came through, well, a couple of things that came through. One, dads want to be different dads. They want to be, and this is, I think, part of the tension too, right? Like, they want to be more emotionally connected to their kids. They want to have more time. They want to be good partners. They want to be equal carers and sharers. They want that. Where they get tripped up is that they're making comparisons often to their own dads. They're going, I don't want to be my dad. Either he's what we call an anti-model, like he was emotionally distant. He only cared about breadwinning. He's not it, right? I want to be everything. He's different. That's one. Or they make the comparison to their dad and they said, he does a pretty good job, but I want to do better. Like he was good, but not good enough. So they make that kind of comparison. And then what happens is a portion of their mental load is spent in what I'm calling Medicare. This is coming through literature. So Medicare, and your wife might be doing this with the thermostat, but is like, what kind of person do I want to be? Like, I want to show up in this world and I want to be an empathetic, kind, emotionally connected dad. And so what they describe is like, my mental load is spent in part thinking through everything I would do by default, everything I would do that I learned. And I have to go, I don't want to do that. Like, I learned from my dad that I would respond in this way. I'd shut down your emotions. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to have to think about another way to do it. And the men are talking about mental load spent ruminating on it, like burning through their energy on this, right? Like it's almost like you can't just go based on what you saw or what you can't, you have to stop and you have to pause and you're going to get things
Mm.
wrong. And that is a mental load energy that men are spending, that fathers are spending. So I'm gonna first ask like how you talk to a lot of men. Does this feel right? Does this resonate? How do you feel about what I'm saying? And then I have another question for you, but I'll stop there. What do you think?
So the problem of my answer is going to be that my bias and or my it's not bias. It's like you're gonna have the right word for it. It's like my sample is like skewed. Um, is
Great. Great. I want to hear.
all the guys that I work with, like, yes, probably 95% of the guys, their wives found me first, introduced me to content, and then probably another 70% of them, it was encouraged, their wives encouraged them to either book the call, some of them booked the call for them. So from there, I think the guys that registered that I do work with, like, they want to do better. So I whenever it comes, like, when people are asking me in the DMs, like, how do I get my husband to see the mental load? The guys I'm actually talking to already kind of get it. Like, they get the heaviness of it. They get that there's an issue. And like they're embracing change, they're embracing education versus I think a lot of guys that we're trying to talk to here in this conversation, a specific part, is more of the guys that I never get to the phone call with. So coming back to your question of like how do I feel about that? So coming back, I'm going to summarize a little bit what you said. So I had said like language, being able to talk about it in multiple contexts is huge. And you had said similarly, like, yep, research absolutely shows that they have the same skills, they're just not being activated. And and the other aspect is like, they want to be, quote, better, but the problem is that they're trying to be better, is that it's a comparative change. It's not like they're cracking out the whiteboard and drawing from scratch what makes a good dad, in drawing from who they want to be. It's typically from who they want to be comparatively to something, someone or something.
And they don't have they don't have, a lot of them said, I don't have a clear role model. So I'm piecing together, like, I like the way this coach treated me, or I like the way this professor was, or this teacher. And so it's like you're creating these synthetic role models, which takes a mental load energy, right? Like that's harder because you don't have this like model of the dad you want to be now. It's like, I want to be different too, as opposed to here's exactly who I want to be and I'm going to model that.
I'm curious how many women are similarly saying I want to be better, different from my mom, or I want to be just about exactly the same as my mom. Like, do women feel really good about their typical role models of mothers and are typically straying away from their mother role models less than men?
It's an interesting question. I think it's less. It was much clearer theme for the men. The short answer is like, of course, mothers are trying to do things different to their mothers. But I think one of the challenges is, and there's this great work, Goldschneider talks about like, women have moved into this new role. Like you're having this women transition into being in paid employment or gaining power in the public sphere. Like they've done that over 100 years, right? It's like fight for the right to vote, fight for the right to access work, right? Like this is kind of a slow change. But for many men, this has happened almost overnight. It's like it's a very quick change, right? So what we're asking men to do now and what men want to do now is like 10 years, like a generation. It's like it's happened quite quick. And I think part of that is that makes it harder because what's being asked of you, or I shouldn't say being asked of you, because I think men actually want this. I don't think it's like people are
Yeah.
demanding it. What men are saying is like, okay, I don't want to be just this financial provider who's emotionally aloof, who comes home and does nothing and sits on the couch and is disconnected from my family. I want to be connected to my family. I see the value of time with my kids. I see the value of being emotionally vulnerable in my household. I see the value of, my wife's paid employment or elevating her career or making sure she is emotionally connected. Like, I see the value in that and I want to do it different. How do I do that? Ah, where do I go? Because I still have to be a breadwinner, right? New fatherhood norms are, it's not all gone. I still have this expectation to be a financial contributor. So I don't just get to, you know, both
Yeah.
are coming at me. And how do I do that? And it's a change that's happened quick, and it's hard
And
to
most of our
reconcile.
men, most of the leadership that we're dealing with when we're not entrepreneurs is not of that mindset. And
Absolutely.
they're like, what do you mean you're not staying till 7 p.m. every night to get this raise?
Absolutely. And so this is the other piece, right? When I say to you, like, what are the social norms and institutions that are still in place that actually don't let you live the life you want to live? And you're saying, how can we come slowly in and change all those, make them a little different, make them a little bit better, shift that narrative? And that's like the big question. And that's like, how do we do work different? How do we do family different? So it's almost like you all are at the forefront of, and women don't have the power to do it. So you're right. It's like it has to be your manager. And what if your manager doesn't like it? And then what about the culture of the workplace? And how do
Yeah.
you hide some of that or step into some of that? That came through
I
a
know.
lot of the mental load talk too
Yeah. I
from
know one of
that.
my favorite stories that I share of like where I feel like I've positively impacted my work culture when I was after my 4 months of paternity leave. I switched careers from teaching to sales so that I could be like hybrid remote. And I remember I was the top first like 6 months I kind of floundered, and then I was the top producer for 3 quarters straight. Um, Out of 40 of us sales reps were making cold calls every day. Three of us were parents, and me and Alex were the top two. We're the top two producers, and both parents. Um, and I remember they moved us to another team that was sucking wind. They're like, we need you to elevate the spirits over here. And I remember after like week two, so we had an 8 a.m. stand up every morning where we would review what was in our pipeline, what our meetings were. 'Cause our job was to book meetings for the closers. And I remember I jumped off camera to change a diaper, and I heard one of the 22-year-old guys saying, "Oh, Zach's changing a diaper." So I built into the to that culture that they knew that I was being an active parent in real time. And that's what that meant. And I was also pushing against no because I was a top producer. I would take sick days so that I could be home with our child when she was sick as a 1 year old. Um, so I think that moment that I'm actually tearing up a little bit thinking about it, but I think that's like where we have to impact change is those younger men coming in under us, like in those starting roles, seeing how we treat childcare pickup, seeing how we treat parenthood, seeing how we set boundaries and where they ought to be setting boundaries. Like when that moment comes, you're like, oh, you got this big meeting. Hey, that's my kid's baseball game. I'm not missing it. But where there's $1 million deal, sorry, move it. I don't care. Like that, it's going to be that kind of thing that I
Yeah,
think is going to push things forward.
I completely agree. We have I'm working on I'll ask you a question because it's tied to some of the work we're doing right now.
Yeah,
Do you think you became a better worker after becoming a parent?
I'd like to think yes. I also don't know. I think t like I was talking with my friends, so we have once a year we make quarterly goals. We can keep or we
Relationship
practice
hygiene.
our hygiene. We do audio notes every single week. It was based off of I don't know if you've heard of the Waffle Wednesday phenomenon of I think there were Aussie men during COVID.
My people.
Um, started there was a small group of guys that would waffle, which is like to jibber jabber every Wednesday, and they just kept going after COVID. They just loved it. So I did that with my friends, and Frank is in a long-term relationship. Trevor is about to get married. Alex is like a 1 year old. I have a 4 year old and about to have three. So we're all in slightly different aspects of our careers in life. We're all entrepreneurial sales, and Trevor always talks about like playing sports. I'm like, man, I wish I had time for that. And like there are multiple moments when like Frank would be like, man, I just don't have enough time. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, are you nuts? Like, you don't even know what it means to not have time. So there's so and then as I'm thinking like, oh my, and like even right now, I'm thinking like I already don't feel like I have time. I'm about to feel like I have negative time when the twins come in a couple months. And so
Yeah.
coming back to your question of like, do I think I'm better? I think I am forced to be a little more strategic when my time is being spent on those relationships and with our child. Um, like over the summer when we didn't have childcare on Fridays, we decided also because it was going to be, we weren't pregnant yet, but it was really this going to be the last summer of just her on her own. So Alyssa took off Mondays and Zach took off Fridays. So I had a four-day work week throughout the summer. And since Alyssa got pregnant, I started my workday ends at 3:15 to go pick her up instead of 5 o'clock, which I would love to have. So I think naturally we get more efficient when we're constrained with time. That's why this is going to be an odd parallel, but I think some of the best creators of our time on social media were on Vine because they were confined to 7 fucking seconds and they had to figure out how to be entertaining storytellers.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I disagree with everything about the Logan brothers, Logan Paul was entertaining as shit on Vine. He accomplished so much in 7 seconds. Like it makes sense why he is where he is right now. Um, but like the constraint of things makes us so much more creative. And I think similarly, I figured out by the end of my time as a sales rep there, my third quarter of just, I'm very proud of that was my first year in sales. And I had no training going into it. By the end of it, I was able to work 4 hours a day and still produce double what everyone else was. And it was like a constant commitment to um, like efficiency because I just don't have as much time and I want a little bit of leisure. I want to be able to
Yeah.
scroll my phone for 20 minutes at some point in the day. Um, so I would like to think that I've gotten better. I've probably gotten a little bit more strategic, like looking at even my goals for this year. I'm thinking like I can't afford, I think I'm going to cut out LinkedIn posting unless I'm really feeling excited about it because I want to figure out how to have paternity leave that looks like 2 to 4 hours of working per week for about 4 months. And so I've been taking sales calls, coaching calls. I need to figure out in the next 3 months how to delegate a bunch of those things. That's a really long answer, but
I liked it. We run this parenting work skills certificate in Australia, and we're looking about how to kind of bring it across to the US. And I have a podcast episode on it, but these are the skills that people are looking for, the human skills like time
mm,
management, creativity, empathy. And one of the things we're kind of arguing is like, you build all these exactly like you said through your experience of caregiving, right? You have less time. You can see other people's perspectives in different ways, right? Children are the ultimate stretchers. I mean, like stretching
mm,
us to be our best selves, right? Because they call you out on everything you do wrong. They know you so well, and they tell you like
mm,
if you do it right, like right, if you're doing
yeah,
parenting right, they are brutally honest with you in ways that actually force you, if again you're doing it right, to start
yeah,
to reflect and shift and change and grow. And so this is one of the. I was just curious because you're both equally invested in building a business and a career and having the profile, but then also the kids, right? And so
yeah,
I think thank you for being confirmation to what we think is probably another important conversation to continue having.
yeah. Now, I'm tempted to talk about Motherland because I feel like I've been, because I was talking with you a little bit on LinkedIn there, and the post I even heard about this book was on LinkedIn. But how states push mothers out of employment, and I feel like this could be another hour long wormhole, but I would rather focus on your first book. For people that want to binge read both, I'm gonna guess, and you tell me maybe that we'll do this again. You tell me what I'm missing. I'm betting. I mean, coming back to work, like ditching hybrid, um, trashing any kind of parental leave, and or having little to no support. I was lucky in Massachusetts. Alyssa got 5 months I think paid at 66% or something from her work. And then I was a teacher at the time for not a public school. I think I got also like 66%. I was able to get 3 months and then I got I always say I got 4 months. I got appendicitis on literally the last day, and then I got an additional month of leave, which it was only like a recovery for 1 week, so it was at least like
Okay,
2 weeks.
congratulations. All right.
Um, so yeah, maybe tell me what I'm missing from the picture of like how mothers get pushed out.
Okay, so this is an important and interesting question. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this too. One of the things that I've spent the first part of my career doing was really trying to understand, how does context matter? How does living in, say, a country like Sweden impact how you are able to engage in paid employment compared to living in a country like the US or Poland or the UK? So we often think about our cultures and policy structures as creating different opportunities for us based on where we live geographically. And one of the things that always struck me was that the US is often treated as a single kind of welfare state in a lot of the academic talk, but we often think about the US as being like one spot. But each state is very, very different. So it really does make a difference if you live in a state like California or Massachusetts or New York versus living in a state like Idaho or Nebraska or states like this. And so what I wanted to do in this book was capture that variation to see how our policy context, to see how norms, to see how, the concentration of women in higher education, to see how employment opportunities vary for women across these states. And the beautiful thing is that what I thought I would find as a Californian originally was that like my home state of California would be so great, right? Like it's so progressive. Aren't we the greatest state in the country? Like we're progressive. We have all these great policies. Women are highly educated, and I thought I would be able to do a real like victory tour of the U.S. by this. It wasn't what I found at all. Actually, I found California
Mm.
was one of the worst states. I found California was one of
Oh,
the worst states. Well, let me rephrase
damn
that.
it.
What? No, unfortunately, I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all get to hate California again for another reason. Here we here we go. Was what happened was there were states that kind of cleaved in two ways. Well, there's kind of this typology. So there's states that cleaved in kind of two ways. One are those like the Massachusetts and the Californias and the New Yorks of the world, where what they're really good at doing is they're good at giving women education. They're good at giving them employment opportunities that are high paying. And they're really good at the policies. You have more women that represent you in state governments, and they have good policies. Where they're absolutely terrible at is affordable childcare, cost of
Mm,
living, high cost of living, unaffordable childcare, limited after school care, right? School days tend to be shorter. And so you have a group, you make this incredible investment in women's human capital and then push them out when they become mothers. Not because you're pushing them out because they're not valuable, but you're pushing them out because they can't afford the childcare, right? They can't afford to
yeah.
maintain cost of living. And so there was this kind of division. Then there's states that are really good at giving, but there are other states like Nebraska. I lived in Nebraska for a while and I was like, interesting, where they're actually the cost of living is affordable, childcare is more expansive, school days are longer, you can get after school care, and mothers are much more likely to work, right? They're much more likely to maintain employment and they have high employment rates. So one of the things, and then one of
Wow.
the interesting,
That was
not what
like
you
you said,
thought,
like
right?
not what I thought you were gonna say.
I know
Wow.
me too. I like sometimes you go into these research studies and you're like, oh, this is what I think I'm going to find. And I was like, oh, humbled, right? Like
Mm,
totally wrong. And so I think many of you might feel this, your listeners might feel this is like, what are we doing, right? What are we doing when we make these investments? Right? We're making these investments in mothers and making investment in human capital, but then we don't have the infrastructure to support them. Like, what are we doing? Cost of living are high. You can't get childcare. I mean, okay, sorry, I'll pause because you're about to have two babies, right? Like, so what do you think, right? It's like, and then we say, like, well, do more. Like, why aren't you solving this problem? Talk about a mental load. Again, this comes through the mental
mm,
load research, right? Like, thinking about how am I going to do, I can't tell you how many mothers come to me after having their first child and are like, what the fuck is this, right? Like, no one told me. No one told me any of this. It's
yeah.
like, yeah, you're in this really broken system, but actually we could create a different, more humane system where you don't feel like you always have to choose between your work and your life and your family, and you could have affordable childcare. I mean, these are things that happen in other countries. They're not like hypotheticals. They exist. What do you think about this? How does it look like for you? I mean, you're about to have three, right? Like, how do you think about these
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, so we moved. We're still in the Northeast, in a different state, but it was interesting. When we moved from Massachusetts, the we wanted to do Montessori school for our 4-year-old, and it wasn't. It was like 20 or 1900 or like 2100 a month or something in Massachusetts, and then we went here, and now Montessori school is the same price as like the typical daycare that she was in, and it covers more hours. Um, so almost a little bit of that Nebraska effect that you're just talking
Yeah.
about there of like moving to a little bit more rural, less like tightly grouped area, and a little surprised by the availability of things. Now, the economy's not as good here, and it's like probably harder to find a good paying job. Both of us are fully remote, so not an issue in that department. But um, yeah, like there's definitely some moments I think of. I'm really hoping that we can afford a nanny and or we can build enough social relationships in our community that um, both of us get to work. 'Cause I think Alyssa really enjoys her career. She's a little bored at it sometimes, but she enjoys it. Um, and trying to figure out like how can we afford to, because we look at down the road. I think we look at other stay-at-home moms that are been in our families, and we don't love by the like there's a the lifespan now that people have. You get to the empty nester time and you're like you still have a whole life to live. And she definitely does not want to get to that point and be like, well, I just gave my everything to these children, and like now I
Now they're
want
at
to have a career. Like,
university. Now they're at
yeah,
university. They're independent
yeah, like
adults. Yeah.
I want to have been continued building my career and things too. So yeah, I think both of us we really enjoy our work. I certainly enjoy my work. I get my ego stroked every day.
Just
Um,
what every white man needs. You know what I mean?
yeah. If we could all have the confidence of a mediocre white man, right? Um, I'd probably have way too much confidence. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I did a good job answering your question, but I feel like it was surprising by the
Yeah.
childcare. We're already thinking about probably a year and a half in for how we're going to have childcare for them, what that might look like, whether it's a nanny or whether it's them going to like finding a really good fit for a childcare that we feel good about. So we're definitely thinking about those things, how to afford them, how to provide for what we want. Um, I, I think we're seeing that the career that I have here has a lot of upside to it. So continue to put investment in it such that this can be the flagship source of income, but not the only one, is what we're seeing.
All of this is a mental load too. Just to bring it back to like
Mm,
to the first book, right? This is what I want people to start thinking. Like you're doing some mental load thinking, right? About dream building,
mm,
relationship hygiene, is there safety, Medicare. Like, am I living in the world that I want to live in? What does it look like? How can I use my energy? And so I think these are all those aligning factors that then I just
mm,
want to hit this point that like this comes in the conclusion of my book. Like we live in these unequal social worlds. We live, it's influenced by the political environment. It's influenced by the economic environment. Like all these things structure our mental load. But what kind of worlds would we create if we had all our mental load energy for us, right? Like what would happen if we were dropping some of the nonsense? What would happen if we had some space and capacity to be creative, to think about how can we enact some change? What would happen if we could move towards our passions? And what if we weren't just always running on burnout? What would that look like? And I think some of these bigger questions about, health, safety, and like supports would kind of melt away. And then to your point, how
mm.
do we build community? Like if we erode community by saying we're all individual and we just move around the world exactly in our own self-interest, which is like a big lie we got sold, right? Like
Yeah.
what a lie. How do we start to see the value of community and turning, and how do you make that work for you and other families around you? And what's the spillover of that? I mean, that's so cool too, right? We need like a little documentary on that, what that looks
So
like.
I'll ask my last question. That's not even really a question because it's me answering it first, then you adding it to it.
I love
Is
these.
Which, I mean, this is an embodiment of trying to take mental load off people, which is like, don't actually ask your wife open-ended questions, but offer her some options and say, cool, sound good? As your question at the end, given multiple choices. I like trolling people, say, give your wife more to-dos, triple option, default option. Um, what do you want for dinner? Do you want pasta? Do you want pizza? Or do you want chicken tenders? I'm going with chicken tenders if you say nothing. That's a to do. But it occurs to me that when people pick up your book, a huge goal for the women picking it up is for them to make more active choices in the cultural training, the cultural conditioning that we've received, digging into some of those conditions and identifying like what's serving me, what's not serving me.
Correct.
Is this actually conditioning I signed up for? And upon that, doing a little bit of an audit of considering what could I drop that might decrease my drain. And I'm imagining for the men, a lot of it's going to be creating a conversation. Some of them, it's going to be their first conversation hearing mental load. Some of them, it's going to be their 100th, and hopefully this will be the angle that really helps them, and also help the men appreciate and see where their wives are drained and burdened by the the conception is not the word, the perception of guilt and shame that's kind of put on them, and hopefully they're able to see that, and rather than be dismissive about it, which I know I've gone through that phase of like just don't care what they think. Hopefully it'll create some more empathy for those men hearing and seeing that, be like, oh shit, like I can see why she acts the way she does. That does suck. I would like to change and be more empathetic towards how she holds the mental load on those things and grateful for it rather than dismissive that she's doing useless work. What else, if anything, would you want a potential reader to get to on the other side of the end of the book?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the other things is to figure out when you're doing or you have redundancy in your mental load. Like two people can be carrying Anna Catalana Weeks and I have this article too talking about, and this comes through the book about you can duplicate the mental load. Sometimes you're actually draining your mental load because both of you are doing it and it might not be useful. But my ultimate goal at the end of this is that everyone lives lives that are freer, fuller, filled with more joy, and that you can do less mental load. You have space to reignite your dreams, to reignite your passions, to get strategic on where you're going, and to stop spending your mental load as if it's, plentiful, as if it's unlimited, and start getting really clear on how you can spend it in strategic ways. So everything you said was right. I want you to do that and then have these wonderful, beautiful lives, right? Like to have a little space to, go for a walk, even if that's what it is. Lay on the couch without guilt. Start a new business, get a new degree. Like, and this can be true for men and women alike, right? But just having an understanding of it, which gives you more control and empowers you to be your best, most wonderful self and enjoy the time. Even if it's not anything productive, even if it's just recovery time. Because women feel a lot of guilt about that too, but that's another podcast episode.
Well, Leah, thank you so much for joining me today. For
Thank you.
anyone that came on here and was skeptical about having another expert talk about mental load, I've been impressed. I really appreciated the different the adjusting of the thinking that I've done on here, and I appreciate your kind pushback on some of the things I said. So check out the book if you are someone that maybe fair play worked or didn't work for you, maybe the other things worked or didn't work for you. I am not hearing anything in here that is totally a regurgitation of the things. I think that's always a little bit of my fear because I know my entire existence feels like regurgitation of what women have said. So that could be my own projection, but I'm liking the adjustments that you're offering, and the fact that every single thing I said, you're like, well, let me talk about this study that we did to directly interpret that. That's pretty exciting because there's a lot of time I'm absolutely shooting from the hip and I'm not citing anything. So I'm looking forward to being able to cite your research.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And everyone, I love you.
All right. Bye, Leah.
Bye. Nice to see you.